Good evening, Tacoma. Welcome back to our show, Back to Basics, a hardwiring in Christ through conversations. Each week we will focus different topics, focusing on marriage, family, communications, and through the lens of Christ. So, I have my special guest host, Heather. She's in the house again.
Hi, everyone.
All right. Hopefully you guys remember us. If not, you can go to us on Facebook. If you want to engage with us in the conversation, you can call us live at 253-584-1480. That's 253-584-1480. Or text us on Facebook at Back to Basics. And when you're looking for us on Facebook, we have a logo of a compass that's attached for you to identify the page. And if we don't get your questions answered today, we hope to answer them in 24 hours unless we get a surge, which that'd be awesome in our hope in Christ to get his message out and help you all love in practical ways in Christ. So, we're going to give you a quick summary real quick on what we talked about last week because you could have missed the show. So, we talked through about Dr. Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages. We focused on physical touch, which Heather covered, and I covered words of affirmation. I'm so glad because me and physical touch are not friends. We went through the definitions and gave some practical examples on how to apply that in your daily lives. And if you need to catch up, you can go to our Back, number 2, Basics Facebook page to listen to previous podcasts. And we'll be posting that on the top of the page after the show. So, all right, so we're all caught up, right?
Yep.
All right, so we're going to dive into our next language, which is key during this holiday. Heather, do you remember the holiday? What is today?
I know. It's Valentine's Day, and I just want to shout out to all my family and friends. Just a happy Valentine's Day. It's one of my faves.
Yep. I'd like to give a happy Valentine's Day to my wife. Wifey, you know who you are. And my lovely kids, you know, William, Faith, Hope, and Trinity. It's a bundle of energy, and they love physical touch, and Daddy's drained at the end of the day. But I love you much, and I will continue to serve you. So, all right. So, we know what holiday it is. Are you familiar with St. Valentine, Heather?
Yes.
Okay. Can you give me a synopsis of him at all?
Well, essentially, my understanding was it was a priest who was, it was forbidden to get married, and so he felt that that was wrong, and so he encouraged people to have marriages and really believed in love.
Wow, you got a lot more information than I pulled up today. So let me tell you what I pulled up, and I blame Wikipedia for this if I'm wrong. All right, so he was born in 176 A.D., and he died on February 14, 2073 A.D., so that's why we celebrate it that day. Research tells us vaguely that he was a saint in the Catholic Church until about the 1970s, and then they just chopped him off the block. I think the Anglican Church and a couple other churches cover him, and the holiday was trying to replace a pagan holiday, which now we celebrate it as a pagan holiday, so aim high and miss. Whoops. The basic summary is that we want to gravitate this holiday that was the basic summary of the holiday was to gravitate to convert it is the day of romance and devotion. That's the main focus. But how did we go from a man of faith that got beaten with clubs, beheaded, buried under the cover of darkness, disinterred by his followers, which I don't know what that word means, but we'll get that later, and now we commemorate his martyrdom by sending others chocolate? Really? So let's go over and while we're pondering on that, let's dive into the love language of acts of service to redeem these chocolates and cards to our marriage. So Heather, what do you think when I say that my love language is acts of service?
I think acts of service is really very active. Essentially, actions speak louder than words. It's something that's given freely. It is something you want to do, and you're thinking of another person. You're voluntarily giving your time to another person.
Wow, you just took all my notes and copied them.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great that we're on the same page. That's awesome. So if you guys are listening on the radio, you can chime in anytime. You can call us live at 253-584-1480 or hit us up via Messenger on Facebook at Back, the number 2, Basics. And again, the number is 253-584-1480. So that was a really good definition. So let's read a story from Dr. Gary Chapman's book on how he discovered it under a tree in North Carolina. And I guess I'll read the excerpt since the book's next to me. Okay, so he had a conversation in a mill town, This is from his words. I discovered the impact of acts of service in a little village in China Grove, North Carolina. China Grove sits in the central North Carolina, originally nestled in the China berry trees, not far from Andy Griffin's legendary Maryberry. That's really dating myself. At the time of this story, China Grove was a textile town with a population of 1,500. I've been away for more than 10 years studying anthropology, psychology, and theology. I was making my semi-annual visit to keep in touch with my roots. Also, everyone I know except Dr. Shine and Dr. Smith worked in a mill. Dr. Shine was a medical doctor, and Dr. Smith was a dentist. And, of course, there was a preacher Blackburn who was the pastor of the church. For most couples in China Grove, life centered around work and church. The conversation at the mill focused on the superintendent's last decision and how it affected their jobs in particular. The services at church focused mainly on the anticipated joys of heaven. That's awesome. In the pristine American setting, I discovered the love language number 4. So, Dr. Chapman was standing under a chinaberry tree after church on Sunday when a young couple approached him. I didn't recognize either of them. I assumed they have grown up while they were away. Introducing himself, Dave said, "I hear that you've been studying counseling." I smiled and said, "Yeah, a little bit." "I have a question," he said. "Can a couple make it in marriage if they disagree on everything?" It was one of those theoretical questions that I knew I had a personal root, so I went into the point. "How long you been married?" 2 years, he responded, "and we don't agree on anything." "Give me some examples," I said. "Well, for one thing, Mary doesn't like me to go hunting. I work all week in the mill and I like to go hunting on Saturdays. Not every Saturday, but when hunting season is in." Mary had been silent until this point until she interjected, "When hunting season is out, he goes fishing. And besides that, he doesn't hunt just on Saturdays. He takes off from work to go hunting. Once or twice a year, I take to go off 2 to 3 days from work to go hunting in the mountains with some of my buddies." Dave said, irritated, "What's wrong with that?" "What else do you disagree on?" I asked. "Well, she wants me to go to church all the time. I don't mind going on Sunday morning, but Sunday night I like to rest. It's all right if she wants to go, but I don't think I ought to have to go." Again, Mary spoke up. "You don't really want to go either," she said. "You fuss every time I walk out the door." I knew that things weren't supposed to be getting hot under a shady tree in front of a church. Sounds like knife fights. As a young aspiring counselor, I feared that I was getting over my head, but having been trained to ask questions, and listen, I continued. "What other things do you disagree on?" This time Mary answered. "He wants me to stay at home all day and work in the house," she said. "He gets mad if I go see my mother or go shopping or something." "I don't mind her going to see her mother," he said, "but when I come home, I like to see the house cleaned up. Some weeks she doesn't make up the bed for 3 to 4 days, and half the time she hasn't even started supper. I work hard, and I like to eat when I get home. Besides that, the house is a wreck," he continued. "The baby's things are all over the floor, the baby is dirty, and I don't like filth. She seems to be happy to live in a pig pen. We don't have very much, and we live in a small mill house, but at least it could be clean." "What's wrong with him helping around the house?" Mary asked. "He acts like a husband shouldn't do anything around the house. All he wants to do is work and hunt. He expects me to do everything." Thinking that I have a better start looking for solutions rather than prying for more disagreements, I looked at Dave and asked, "Dave, when you were dating before you got married, did you go hunting or fishing every Saturday?" "Pretty much. But I also got home in time to see her on Saturday night. Most of the times I get home in time to wash my truck before to see her. I didn't like to go see her with a dirty truck." As we continued talking, I learned that Mary had gotten married right out of high school and that during the senior year, Dave came to see her almost every night and stayed up for supper. He would help me do the chores around the house, and we'd sit and talk until supper time. "David, what did you two do after supper?" I asked. He looked up from a sheepish smile and said, "Well, the regular dating stuff, you know. But if I had a school project," Mary said, "he'd help me with that. Sometimes we'd work hours on school projects. I was in charge of the Christmas float from the senior class. He helped me with 3 weeks every afternoon. He was great." I switched gears and focused on the third area of their disagreement. "Dave, when you were dating, did you go to church with Mary on Sunday nights?" "Yes, I did," he said. "If I didn't go to church with her, I couldn't see her that night. Her father was strict that way." I thought I was beginning to see some light, but I wasn't sure when they'd be seeing it. So I asked Mary, When you were dating Dave, what convinced you that he really loved you? What made him different from the other guys you had dated? It was the way he helped me with everything, he said. She said, sorry. None of the other guys cared about all that. He even helped me wash the dishes when he had supper at our house. He was the most incredible person I've ever met, but after we got married, that changed. Turning to Dave, I asked, why do you think you did all these things for her before you were married? It just seemed natural to me, he said. It's what I would want someone to do for me if she cared about me. And why do you think you stopped helping her after you got married? I asked. Well, I guess I expected to be like my family. Dad worked and Mom took care of things at the house. I never saw my dad do anything around the house. Since Mom stayed at home, she did everything: cooking, cleaning, washing, and ironing. I just thought that was the way it's supposed to be. Now that we're getting somewhere, Dave, a moment ago, what did you hear Mary say when I asked her what really made her feel loved when you were dating? He responded, helping her with things and doing things with her. So can you understand how you could feel unloved when you stopped helping with her things? He was nodding. I continued. It was a normal thing for you to follow the model of mother and father in the marriage. Almost all of us tend to do that. But your behavior towards Mary was a radical change for your courtship. The one thing that I have assured her of your love disappeared. So we can go on forever for that. That at least gives you a good example on what that is. So what we're saying in this excerpt is that how do I deliver this love language, pretty much? Because it's pretty lengthy and pretty arduous, this article. And what Dr. Chapman discovered was that acts of service have a different dialect, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So we're going to understand how both spouses have... Actually, the first question I'm going to ask is that, do you think both spouses have a different love language? Heather?
They definitely can. I think in the excerpt that you just read, one of the key pieces that you shared was that the husband was very helpful, and that meant a lot to his wife, or soon-to-be wife. And I think that's one of the that's really important when we talk about acts of service, is that it is very thoughtful, attentive, and helpful, and it's also voluntarily given. So it's not something where a person feels an obligation. It's something that you want to do as far as acts of service. So you want to do something nice for your significant other. Yeah.
And also, you find out, too, that we all have different love languages. Like, for mine, it's acts of service and quality time. And for my wife, it's physical touch and words of affirmation. We're totally opposite. It's very rare. In this excerpt, they were both the same love language. They're both asking for the same thing. So, but what if we were the same love language and we're still at a wit's end? Then you listeners think about that. If you want to call in, you can chime in, 253-584-1480. Or hit us up on Back to Basics on Facebook, and that's back with the number 2, Basics. So let's talk about dialects for a second. Heather, have you ever talked to someone from another part of the country and couldn't understand what they were saying? And what was the problem?
Well, I know I took one college class, and it was in math, and the person had a different language, was not English speaking. And so it was quite the challenge math is challenging enough, but then when you add a different language on top of that, it became very difficult to understand the different concepts and actually, perform and do the homework and then also succeed on the test. So it becomes a roadblock for sure.
And what happens, let's say you have same person, same language, but from a different part of the country, let's say from Georgia compared to Washington. Do you see any differences when you're speaking to them?
Not necessarily. I mean, if you have the same love language, it's like, oh, we're on the same page. We understand what motivates us, what we appreciate, and I think it can be good.
Mm-hmm. But there is sometimes this thing that happens is that the dialect. So I could be both the same love language. I could be physical touch and you could be physical touch, but we look for it in a different way. So I'm wondering what we do during that time. So, and what do you mean, and what do you guys think about that? What do you think that dialect is? Do you guys have any insight at all? You can give us a chat back. Call live at 584-1480, or hit us on Facebook, the Back to